Hey guys, it's Charles from Tech Always, and I just want to apologize for the inconsistent content over the past few months. Over the summer I didn't have much of an excuse, but ever since school started I haven't had a lot of free time, and I've had a lot of work. But hopefully I'm back for good now with a video that I'm sure you guys are going to love. Meet Nick, my $150 used gaming PC. So let's get right into it. With most of the builds on the channel, I've bought almost all the parts separately, but with this build I decided to try a more cookie cutter strategy where you buy a main base system and then you upgrade the GPU. And this is recommended by a lot of other YouTubers, and I was able to find a main PC for $100. So let's look inside and see what parts I got. So at the heart of this build is an AMD FX 8320. The CPU came out in 2012 on AMD's piledriver architecture, so while it has pretty weak IPC, its 8 cores, 3.5 GHz base clock, and unlocked multiplier still make it a viable option in a modern gaming PC when paired with a lower end GPU. So this build only had the stock AMD cooler, and while if you're keeping up with Ryzen you'll think AMD has pretty good stock coolers that allow for some pretty good overclocking and relatively quiet operation, that wasn't always the case. Older AMD CPUs such as the 8320 were much less power efficient and the coolers were much louder. This tiny little fan makes the PC insanely loud and the cooler really limits the overclocking potential, but we'll get more into that later. So both these fit into the Asus Sabertooth 990FX R.2 motherboard, and if I wasn't limited by the cooler, this board would have been an overclocking champ. While it would be good for overclocking, it definitely isn't pretty with its brown color scheme. I'm really glad that motherboards have gotten better looking recently, and you can definitely tell this wasn't built for cases with Windows in mind. For memory, this build came with the golden standard of DDR3, a 2x4GB Crucial Ballistic Sport 1600 MHz kit. If you were building a PC on a budget a few years ago, this was basically the RAM you went with, as it was always cheap and while it didn't look great, it got the job done. So to power this build, there was a Corsair CX600M green label. This is a semi-modular 80 plus bronze power supply, and I had to specify green label because Corsair has recently revamped their CX line to be much higher quality. And this model wasn't known for having amazing reliability, but it worked fine in this build and I actually have been running the same model in my main rig for the past year and a half with no problem. For storage, this build had a 1TB Western Digital Blue drive and no SSD. While this made overclocking a bit more painful because of the slow boots and longer loading times on games, it was still completely usable and offers plenty of space for games and other programs. For the case, this build featured a very beat up Corsair 300R. It still works fine for building in, but one of the 3.5-inch bay covers doesn't stay in. Some of the front panel clips are broken. The side panel is dented so it doesn't fit in all the clips, but it doesn't fall out or anything. But like I said before, even though there is a lot of physical damage, it was still fully functional and the build experience was mostly unaffected. You might be wondering why I saved the GPU for last, and that's because it's actually the only part of the build that I had to swap out. The build I bought had an EVGA GTX 750, which only has 1GB of VRAM, which just isn't enough for modern gaming. And you heard that right, not 750 Ti, but normal 750. But considering I was able to pick up this entire system for $100, having a weak GPU doesn't really matter. But speaking of the GPU I replaced it with was a Sapphire R9 270X with 2GB of VRAM. While this isn't a crazy upgrade over the 750 that was in the system, it'll make a considerable difference in games. But I was able to pick up this 270X from Micro Center open box for $62.50 after tax. But after a $20 mail-in rebate, the price of this card came down to only $42.50. This made the final cost to build $142.50, and with the parts that I have inside of it, that's actually offering some pretty good value. But let's look at a part-by-part cost breakdown and also see what I would guess the price of the parts would be for the $100 build that I bought. For the CPU, it would be about $25, the motherboard would be about $25, the RAM would be $15, the hard drive would be $10, PSU would be $10, case would be $5, and GPU would be $10. That all adds up to $100, which is what the build was cost. Rounding out the list, $42 for the R9 270X. But I did take this PC apart to shoot B-roll and clean all the parts, so let's look at a quick montage of me putting the PC back together. So I hope you enjoyed that build montage, and I actually really enjoyed building this PC as I didn't run into any issues in the build process in the first time setup. Everything worked as it should at the very beginning. But before I can get into any benchmarks, I had to dial in some overclocks on the parts. So starting off with the CPU, I was able to hit 4.4 GHz on all cores without raising the voltage at all. While I would have liked to bring up the voltage on this CPU and hit a higher overclock, I just couldn't do it because the AMD stock cooler really held me back. If there was any voltage change to the CPU, as soon as you started a stress test, the PC would overheat and shut down almost immediately. And even with the 4.4 GHz overclock with no voltage change, the CPU would still hit 59 degrees, which is just 3 degrees below the recommended limit by AMD, which is 62 degrees for the 8320. And even at stock voltages, the CPU cooler was by far the loudest part in the build, but I guess that's what you get for using an old stock AMD cooler. So just to summarize all that, 4.4 GHz on the CPU, but now let's get into the GPU. On the GPU side, I wasn't actually able to run an overclock because any overclock above plus 30 MHz would cause the GPU to have heavy artifacting, and when you're only getting a plus 30 MHz, that difference can maybe be an FPS or two, and considering how much artifacting I was getting immediately after running anything above 30 MHz, it would be hard to tell the stability of any other overclock, and I didn't really want to take that risk considering how small the gains would be, so I just left the GPU at stock clocks. But now let's get into those benchmarks. Alright, starting off with some synthetic benchmarks, we have 3D Mark Firestrike. This PC got a score of 5,857, which is pretty good, but it looks like the combined score dragged the build down. For the second synthetic test, I ran Unigine Heaven at the high preset. This is a very demanding test, and this PC got an average FPS of 52 and a minimum of 53, and these numbers make me think this PC will do very well in the next few games. So the first real game, I wanted to test something that's not hard to run and is very popular, so I tried out CSGO at maxed out settings. This PC got an average of 187 FPS and a minimum of 134. This will allow anybody to be competitive if they had the skill, and this PC wouldn't hold them back. But coming to the next game, I tried out Rocket League at again maxed out settings. Here, this PC was able to get an average of 109 FPS and a minimum of 93 FPS, which provided a very nice experience. The final big esports game that I tested that's still fairly easy to run was Blizzard's Overwatch. I tested this game on the Ultra preset and got 63 FPS average and 54 FPS minimum. This was great for most gameplay, but if you want to take it to the next level, you can still turn the settings down or keep it above 60 at all times. The next thing I tested was just for fun, and I doubt anybody watching the video will have heard of it, let alone have played it, but I really enjoy it, so I included it, and that's Rock of Ages 2, Bigger and Bolder. This is a different spin on a tower defense game, and I would definitely recommend it, but this PC got an average of 42 FPS and a minimum of 24 FPS at max settings. I also tested Doom, which is a very demanding game, on max settings where this PC was able to get 34 FPS average and 24 FPS minimum. Keep in mind though, this game is a very demanding AAA title that costs a third of what this entire PC costs. I also tested PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, a hugely popular battle royale shooter that is now the most popular game on Steam. At low settings, this PC was able to get an average of 46 FPS and a minimum of 20 FPS. While this isn't amazing, it's fine for just playing casually, and it only really dipped down in gunfights, and besides that it was sitting in the high 40s to low 50s. You'd also probably hit 60 FPS if you lowered the settings. The final game I tested was GTAV at the high preset with 16 times anisotropic filtering, FXAA, and no MSAA. Here this PC got an average of 71 FPS and a minimum of 6, but I was actually impressed by this, and while the numbers were from the in-game benchmark, when actually playing it was still very smooth. So those are the benchmarks. I was really impressed with this PC and what I was able to do with just $150, being able to run most titles at high or max settings with reasonable FPS. This PC probably has the best value out of any PC I've built on the channel, and while it's not that easily replicable, you could probably get something with similar performance if you got one of those i5 2400 or 3470 pre-builts on eBay for around $100 and then got a decent GPU and power supply for another $75 or so. But if you like this video, be sure to like it. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. If you want a behind the scenes look on the channel, be sure to follow me on Twitter at TechAlways with 2 S's. Thanks for watching. Bye.